Microdosing is when you derive the maximum benefit from taking the minimum effective dose. This is how you minimize unwanted effects. People microdose for many different reasons: mental health, wellness, performance. I like to use microdose at the end of my work week on Friday nights. It helps me catch up on all that much-needed sleep. Today's podcast is sponsored by Microdose Gummies and Lumi Labs. Microdose gummies deliver perfect entry-level doses of THC that help you feel just the right amount of good. I love this company and personally use their products. Life is exhausting, but I like to live it to the fullest. So I take Microdose gummies to catch up on quality sleep on the weekends because I miss so much sleep during the week. The gummies are organic, infused with real fruit, vegan-friendly, gluten-free, and they taste good. Microdose is available nationwide. To learn more about microdosing THC, go to microdose.com and use code BEYOND to get free shipping and 30% off your first order. Links can be found in the show description, but again, that's microdose.com and code BEYOND.
This podcast contains adult themes and graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised.
A commercial-free version of this podcast is available on Patreon for $1 per month. Patreon.com/Beyond Contempt Podcast. I'm Renee, and this is Beyond Contempt True Crime. Sorry there was no episode 2 weeks ago for that last week of June. I was sick, and my podcast voice wasn't what it needed to be. This was the episode that I had planned. So today, we have yet another Wisconsin case, which is currently ongoing. You're listening to episode 82, Tanna Togstad and Timothy Mumbrue. On Sunday, March 22nd, 1992, Detective Donald Berglund was called out to Route 1 Butternut Road in the township of Royalton, Wisconsin. This unincorporated central Wisconsin township sits inside of Wapaka County and only holds 1,500 people. When the detective walked into the bedroom, he discovered a horrendous scene. He found 23-year-old Tanna Togstad, 34-year-old Timothy Mumbrue, and Tanna's dog all had been stabbed to death. The detective found no weapons in the home. Money had been left untouched in the bedroom, so there was not much evidence that the perpetrator was trying to commit a robbery. Nothing appeared missing from the house. Fingerprints were found in the home, and some of the print impressions were found in the victim's blood. However, this was not immediately helpful to the investigation. The 2-story farmhouse belonged to Tanna Togstad. Tanna's family tried to call her on that Saturday, but couldn't reach her by phone. On Sunday, they went to Tanna's house, discovered the bodies around 3 p.m., and called the authorities. Tanna's sister, Veronica Johnson, lived in a mobile home next door and recalled seeing a small pickup truck with a cap pulled out of the driveway around 4 a.m. on March 21st. The truck subsequently headed west on Butternut Road. Tanna's body was found in her bed and was covered. She had been stabbed through the blanket that rested on top of her. Timothy was found on the floor by the bed. He had been wearing only his underwear. Tanna and Timothy were stabbed with a large hunting knife, which was never recovered. The sheriff said the house could easily be entered without a key. The autopsies were performed on March 23, 1992. Tanna had been stabbed in her neck and chest. The wound penetrated her left lung. She had an abrasion across the bridge of her nose. Fluids were also found on Tanna's body and were sent to the State Crime Laboratory in Madison, Wisconsin, for analysis. Timothy had multiple stab wounds in the head, neck, heart, and lungs. His throat had been slashed. He had been stabbed 27 times. The medical examiner believed that the homicidal deaths occurred in the early hours on Saturday, March 21st. The couple had been seen out around 11:30 p.m. on Friday night March 20th in Clintonville, Wisconsin, where they went to see a country band. It was estimated they had arrived home just after midnight. 2 weeks passed, and no arrests were made, but investigators were working off the theory that the killer knew the victims. The situation was complicated because the victims were younger and had many acquaintances. During the summer of 1992, investigators conducted 500 to 600 interviews, with 4 detectives working 12 to 14-hour days. Relatives of Tanna and Timothy had a hard time not knowing who harmed their loved ones. Carrie Togstad was trying to get back to normal life, but it was difficult knowing that the killer could be an acquaintance of their family. Tanna's sister, Veronica, had deadbolts on each door and purchased a Rottweiler. They kept their guns loaded and moved their mobile home away from Tanna's house, which was on the family-owned lot. Tanna's phone records were subpoenaed. Long-distance phone calls that were placed from March 13th to the 22nd were going to be looked at. Rumors had been circulating around the small town about potential suspects. All those rumors were checked out by investigators. Within the first few weeks, 2 of the prime suspects were eliminated. Eventually, most of the acquaintances in their inner circle had been ruled out. But this had been challenging for law enforcement because the couple knew so many people. 8 weeks into the investigation, Tanna's mother, Helen Hoffman of New London, Wisconsin, put up a reward. She offered $15,000 for information that led to the arrest and conviction of the killer. Tanna didn't have enemies and was a cheerful woman. She had a caring heart and was the kind of person who took stray cats in. Tanna would drive all the way into town to buy the strays food. She inherited the farmhouse from her dad and worked on remodeling it. She recently bought a truck that she was excited about. Tanna worked at Kraft Churney Cheese Factory as a machine operator in Wyowega and loved her job. She had worked there since graduating from New London High School in 1987. Tim was employed at Wapaka Foundry, where he worked in the core room on second shift. Tanna and Tim were both interested in the rodeo and planned to hit the summer circuit. They were going to be partners in rodeo competitions. Tim was teaching her how to rope calves. Tanna had never been married. Timothy had been married twice, and his second divorce was about to be completed. Tim and Tanna had only dated for a short time and had been together for less than 1 year. With Timothy's impending divorce, detectives looked into his wife. There had been at least one suspicious event that was never resolved. Tim's truck had been destroyed in a fire on January 25th while parked outside of his house. The source of the fire was never determined, and it was ruled an accident. So there was no obvious connection between that fire and his murder. Tim's estranged wife, Colleen, called into work sick the day before they were murdered. Colleen wrote a threatening letter to Tim on February 17, 1992. In that letter, she warned, "If you think anything of your health, beware of Tanna Togstad. You're not the only one she's sleeping with." From a few concerned males, Colleen mistakenly believed Tanna's last name was Togstad, which was incorrect. There was another letter from March 20th that was found in Tanna's mailbox. "He has told me how he still loves his wife and wishes they would get back together. He says you are just to fill the void and his needs until he can get his wife back. Because of his jealousy, he gets real violent and might start beating up on you." Colleen admitted to writing both letters, and her fingerprints were found on one of them. She claimed she wrote them in response to prank phone calls she was receiving. It was also reported that Colleen told another person if she had a gun, she would shoot Timothy Mumbrue. There was a $100,000 insurance policy on his life, but that had been taken out 4 years prior. Colleen said if she knew who committed the murders, she would tell the police. She was growing sick and tired of being treated like she committed the crime. Investigators even looked into Colleen's friendships, believing that she might have paid someone to commit the crime. This lead never panned out. In November 1992, Tanna's headstone was vandalized. This was the second time this happened. During the first time, the stone was pushed over, and Tanna's mom had her picture inlaid in the stone. Now, the stone would have to be entirely replaced, as someone had smashed it with a heavy object, splitting it vertically. In December 1992, Tanna's friends held a benefit dance to raise additional reward money, as her and Timothy's murders had not been solved. Police looked into one of Tanna's former boyfriends. They did it for 3 years and broke up in 1990. After they split, her ex-boyfriend became so despondent and depressed that he checked into St. Elizabeth Hospital. Another woman dated him in June 1991, and she believed he was obsessed with Tanna Togstad. He would say things like, "Look at the geek she's with now," or, "What a slut she was." They broke up a few months later. The ex-boyfriend was interviewed by investigators and said he had an alibi. He was at the Grandview Beach Club until 2 a.m. on March 22nd and went to bed at 2:30 a.m. 1 year after the murders, the crime remained unsolved. The mothers of Tanna and Timothy spent the year agonizing over the whys of what happened. Tanna's mother spent much of her time visiting her daughter's grave. Tim still didn't have a gravestone, and his mother was going to purchase one in the spring after the ground thawed. In the meantime, she had made a cross out of grapevines and was hoping it would remain untouched. She wanted to put a shamrock on it. Tim's mother had been having heart problems. She never had issues with her heart in the past, and she told her specialists that her heart was broken. In January 1998, the state of Wisconsin formed a cold case homicide investigation unit, which was created by the state's attorney general. Timothy Mumbrue and Tanna Togstad's case was 5 years old, and the cold case unit immediately added it to their list of cases to work on. Waupaca County had put in the request for help because after 5 years' time, they were unable to arrest anyone or make progress on the case. However, the cold case unit made little progress as well. In August 2013, Tanna and Timothy's case was over 2 decades old and remained unsolved. But several states away in Oklahoma, there would be a glimmer of hope that the case might be solved soon. 42-year-old Glendon Gauker pleaded guilty to murder, rape, sodomy, kidnapping, and gun and drug charges. This was part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty for his heinous crimes. Glendon Gauker agreed to serve 5 life sentences plus 70 years. Along with the prison time, he agreed to help the police with 2 other crimes. In 1990, he took a woman to an Iola, Wisconsin park and sexually assaulted her. The rape was violent. He put a knife on the victim's back and said he was not afraid to use the weapon. He told the victim that it didn't matter to him if she was warm or dead. Police discovered this past crime through DNA analysis. The other crime was the 1992 murder of Tanna Togstad and Timothy Mumbrue. Investigators considered him a person of interest in the Wisconsin murders, but never labeled him a suspect. Glendon Gauker had lived in Waupaca County at the time of Timothy and Tanna's murders. He moved to Oklahoma in September 1993. Glendon was caught by police in 2010 when he lured a young man and his girlfriend to his house. "19-year-old Ethan Walton was born in Spokane, Washington. He lived in Ohio, but moved to Oklahoma to change up his life. He previously worked as a lifeguard, but was looking forward to his future. The 6-foot-tall young man was a well-rounded athlete in high school. He played football, was on the wrestling team, he competed in pole vaulting, and ran track. Ethan had a no-quit attitude. He was injured in a football game and refused to come off the field until the game was over. Ethan wasn't able to play football for a length of time, but he still went to every single practice while his injury healed. He enjoyed reading and playing Xbox. Ethan was an artist and a musician. He played saxophone, but could play just about any instrument he tried. Ethan designed the Celtic tattoo that was etched on his right arm. He was very patriotic and planned to join the army, just like his father had. Ethan was a practical joker and often played tricks on his sisters. He sprayed cooking oil all over the dishes when it was his sister's turn to wash them. Their parents kept making her wash the dishes repeatedly because she couldn't get them clean. Ethan and his 20-year-old girlfriend, Amanda Burney, went to Glendon Goker's house in Prague, Oklahoma, to discuss land that Ethan had for sale. Goker had been an acquaintance of Ethan's father, and that was how they were connected. On September 8th, 2010, Ethan followed Glendon into a shed on Glendon's property, while Amanda waited in the car. After some time passed, Glendon's wife, 29-year-old Michelle Goker, went to the car and asked Amanda to be a witness to the signing of paperwork. What Amanda didn't know was that Glendon Goker already attacked Ethan. He was on the ground, bloody and unconscious. Goker put his hand over Amanda's mouth, threatened to kill her, and promised he would put her in the freezer if she didn't comply. Glendon Goker held Amanda captive in a shed and repeatedly raped her. He then brought her inside of the house and tied her to a bed. Amanda was left alone in the bedroom, but Michelle Goker periodically checked on her. Amanda found a knife on a gun rack behind the bedroom door. When Michelle came by to conduct a check, Amanda used the knife and stabbed Michelle Goker in the hand. Michelle closed the door and called for her husband. Amanda made a split decision and broke the bedroom window to escape. She ran across the field during the night. Her body was bloody and without clothes. Michelle Goker tried to stop Amanda from escaping by shooting at her. Amanda made it across the Goker's yard unscathed, ran to a neighbor's house, and asked for help. The neighbor dialed 911 and hid Amanda in her bedroom closet. She was worried that Glendon would show up, and he did. The neighbor convinced Goker that she had not seen a woman, and she got him to leave her home as the police were en route. Both Glendon and Michelle Goker were arrested at their home. A family member was called and picked up their twin 4-year-olds. A .380 caliber pistol was found with blood on it. Blue and red tape was found attached to the headboard of a bed in the Goker's house. Amanda had been held there for 8 hours. Ethan's body was eventually found stuffed into a 55-gallon drum, where his arms had been cuffed and his ankles had been taped. Ethan had been bludgeoned to death, and Amanda's clothes were found under his body. Initially, Glendon Goker asked his mom to get him an attorney. His mother claimed that Ethan was committing a home invasion, and her son was just defending himself. This claim was easily dismissed, since the evidence was so strong. Self-defense doesn't include tying people up to a bed or killing them and sticking them in a 55-gallon drum. Glendon Goker was denied bail. Michelle Goker's bail was set at $1 million. It was also uncovered that Glendon Goker's wife, Michelle, was also his half-sister. Michelle Goker was found guilty of kidnapping and possession of an uncontrolled drug. Her firearms charge was dropped because it was too hard to prove in court. She was sentenced to 20 years, but was released early in September 2017. Investigators in Wisconsin would not comment on the DNA found on Tanna Togstad, and if it was linked to Glendon Goker. In November 2013, the connection between Glendon Goker's plea deal and Tanna Togstad's murder case led investigators to conduct a 12-hour search of a property in Amherst, Wisconsin. 69-year-old Lynn Shields owned the store being searched, and it was called B Bar 10 Western Store on County B near U.S. Highway 10. The shop sold boots, Western clothing, and motorcycle gear. It had been in operation for over 40 years. The public and press did not know what was going on until Lane gave an interview. He said investigators were looking for hidden rooms, tunnels, or any evidence that led to Tanna Togstad's murder case. This was the first time that the Togstad family had seen investigators point the finger at a suspect. Glendon Goker had been a former employee of Lane Shields. Goker implicated Lane in the murders, even though they had not seen each other in over 20 years. The police search of Lane's property resulted in no evidence, and the case was back to being cold. On August 11, 2022, 51-year-old Tony Haase was picked up at Wapaka Foundry where he worked. Special Agent Jay Yergis had been assigned to the Togstad Mumbrue case since spring 2015. He interviewed Tony Haase at the police station, and Haase denied having anything to do with the murder. He claimed to have remembered the news of their deaths in 1992. Haase claimed to have no memory of the homicides, but over the years, snippets of memories came to him. He even remembered minor details, like there was a set of dumbbells inside the house. Haase recalled leaving Tanna's house and turning right out of her driveway. He voluntarily gave law enforcement a DNA sample and fingerprints. The prints were a match from a partial bloody handprint found on the interior of the door. His DNA also matched the fluids found on Tanna. Tony Haase said his father had been friends with Tanna Togstad's father. His father had been killed in a snowmobile accident when he was 7. In his interview, he mistakenly said he was 5 or 8. The accident was a terrible one and happened on December 31st, 1977. There had been a group of 3 snowmobilers, and they were racing. The second snowmobile hit his father's snowmobile, and the third snowmobile ran over the driver of the second. Haase' father died, and one of those other snowmobile drivers had been Tanna Togstad's father.
Well, I was in a drunken stupor that night. I told you that. Mm-hmm. But my dad got killed. I don't remember if it was Tanna's dad that actually hit him. There was 3 of them. It was a terrible accident. My dad was driving, they were racing snowmobiles down Goo Road. My dad's belt blew. Snowmobile coming up behind them because, once the belt blows, no lights. Hit him, killed my dad instantly. The third guy coming up ran that guy over. It was a horrible accident. Excuse me. And I don't even know who hit who. I was 5 years old. Mm-hmm. I remember the big fights at the funeral. Because my mom and dad were going too forwards. My mom got blamed for it all. I remember that. And for whatever reason, that night, I had never even thought about any of that shit before. I remembered that. And that's what I remember about why I would have been at, why I went to the house.
On March 20th, 1992, Tony Haase was bar hopping by himself and got extremely intoxicated. That night he had been thinking about his father and went to Tanna Togstad's home. He claimed he did not go there to hurt anyone, but got in a fight with Timothy Mumbrue.
I was drunk, and all I could think about was that accident. And I didn't go there to hurt anybody. I didn't. But I honestly can tell you that I don't know what happened, what started it all. I don't. I know that in my drunkenness, that accident was on my mind.
And you blamed Tanna's dad for killing your dad?
I don't know. He was involved.
Okay.
It's not that I'm saying that he killed my dad. That's what I can remember.
Okay.
And yes, I didn't want to go out and say, well, I remember her dad hurt my dad. Because then you guys are going to think, oh, he planned this.
Right.
No, I didn't. Yet, I do not understand how it happened. I don't.
Do you remember talking to her at the house?
No.
You remember seeing her?
I remember getting into the scuffle. And everything else after that is pretty much a blank.
You're in a scuffle with who?
With Tim.
Okay.
And that next really thing that I remember is coming out of the house, puking all over. And that's what I know. And I don't remember, I don't know that I hurt those people. I must have. I'm not denying that. I don't. I remember thinking about it, thinking about the accident, which was, I was 5 years old when it happened. Or no, I was probably 8 years. I was 8 years old. I was 5 when I broke my leg. And those were the only memories I had left of my dad. Was remembering when we were walking around and playing with BB guns and crap like that. And for whatever reason, that night, it hit me. Like, for whatever reason, that accident popped up in my head from forever ago. I have no explanation for it. And
so you have some unresolved issues with your dad's death, the loss of your father. Add some alcohol, that becomes on your mind. Don't know to what extent Tanna's dad did or wasn't involved. Somehow you get to Tanna's house. You remember a scuffle with Tim. Do you remember a scuffle with Tim first and then Tanna, or Tanna and then Tim?
I think it was him.
On which side of the bed? Would it have been his side or her side? Does he come across?
That I don't remember.
Because there's blood across that headboard and that back wall of the drape. Everything kind of moves that way.
Haase couldn't remember if he used a knife from their house or brought his own. He repeatedly stabbed Timothy until he dropped to the floor. Tanna yelled, "What the fuck?" So Haase punched her in the face. He remembered the punch knocking her out. When Tanna started to wake up, Haase stabbed her in the chest. He was asked why he didn't tell law enforcement about the crime, and Haase said he didn't want to sound like he planned the crime. He didn't know why he did it. When he saw the crime reported on the news, he thought, "Holy fuck, what did I do?" Haase was charged with 2 counts of murder for the 1992 deaths of Tanna Togstad and Timothy Mumbrue. On the next day, a judge set his bail at $2 million. On July 6, 2022, Haase was detained during a traffic stop, and a DNA sample was taken from a pen he used to sign a warning ticket. The DNA was analyzed by the crime lab on July 18th, and it was consistent with the profile of fluids that were found on Tanna Togstad's body. He was promptly picked up by the investigators on August 11th. Tony Haase was an area resident. He was born in Wapaka and graduated from Waiawega Fremont High School in 1989. Haase lived only a few miles away from Tanna's brother, Richard Togstad, all those years. Haase wasn't a complete stranger to the Togstad family. Richard didn't know Tony Haase, but knew his father, grandfather, and grandmother. Richard Togstad experienced a lot of loss over the years. He lost his 49-year-old father, David, in 1985. His 23-year-old sister, Tanna, was murdered in 1992. Then Richard buried his 44-year-old brother, Jeffrey, unexpectedly in 2015. Just as Richard thought his family would receive a modicum of closure after 30 years, his 82-year-old mother, Helen, passed away a few days after Tony Haase's arrest. Richard took to Facebook and wrote, "My mother passed away, finally at peace." Richard and his family planned on attending as many court proceedings as possible. On January 30th, 2023, Tony Haase had a preliminary hearing. Special Agent Jay Yurgis testified about taking over the investigation in 2015. During cross-examination, the defense attorney questioned the agent about the tactics used in the interviews with Haase. He suggested that Special Agent Yurgis elicited a false confession. Yurgis reminded the defense attorney that Haase was not read his Miranda rights because he voluntarily spoke with investigators for 4 hours prior to admitting that he might have committed the murder. The defense also argued that the DNA evidence, which placed his client at the crime scene, was not conclusive. Haase told police that he vomited before leaving the scene. When asked, Yurgis said he was not aware of any evidence or report that documented finding the vomit at the crime scene. But the agent said that it might have been overlooked because of the snow that had fallen. In March 2023, Tony Haase pleaded not guilty to the murders. The trial date has not yet been set. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Beyond Contempt. Please visit beyondcontemptpodcast.com for the links to the sources and music in this episode. Research, writing, editing, audio production, and sound design were performed by me, Renee. I want to thank patrons Christina C. and Shaz W. Thank you for supporting the show. If you like the show, please leave me a positive review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thank you so much, everyone.